gun violence in Chicago.
It can happen anywhere at any time.
For some neighborhoods, it's a constant presence, leaving a lasting imprint of trauma.
When you hear gunfire in a community, what do you do?
Highland Park grabbed worldwide attention for one day of terror. But in some Chicago communities, violence is the daily reality.
This is a public health crisis.
Tonight, we're searching for solutions to address the gun crisis in Chicago.
Good evening. It's great to have you with us. I'm Joe Donlon.
And I'm Erica Sargent. Welcome to our special Searching for Solutions, addressing gun violence in Chicago. We wanted to have this conversation in the wake of the Highland Park tragedy on the 4th of July.
That's because just an hour or so away on Chicago's south and west sides, there were a number of tragedies that holiday weekend. We know 7 people were killed in the Highland Park shooting, but 8 people were shot and killed in Chicago, another 68 injured on that same weekend. Stunning numbers that are a constant in the city, often overlooked and leaving a lot of people traumatized in the aftermath.
For many, it's been hard to understand why the response and outpouring of support to Highland Park isn't the same response to every mass shooting in Chicago.
Tonight, we look at the hardworking community first responders throughout the city who are fighting for change every day.
Our backdrop is a beacon of hope in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood. The new Healthy Lifestyle Hub is opening in just a few weeks. It's an example of how investing in a community can bring a neighborhood together to drive out violence, create jobs, and provide critical care. More on that coming up. But first, how does Chicago's gun violence rank compared to the rest of the country? The numbers tell the story. For mass shootings in all of the United States, Chicago has the most of any city, large or small, 24 this year alone, leaving 12 people dead and 101 injured.
If there is any positive news to come from this data, for the first time in 4 years, the number of mass shootings in Chicago is falling. Take a look at this graphic. By the time this time last year, we saw 32 shootings with 4 or more people hit by gunfire. Comparing us with cities of 500,000 people or more, Chicago actually falls to number 4 behind Sacramento, Baltimore, and Philadelphia. Again, when it comes to victims injured and killed per capita. So a lot of people hear these numbers and wonder, how did we get here? Well, disparities in education, housing, and health care are just a few reasons the south and west sides have struggled to flourish.
Adding to all of that, neighborhood disinvestment. We know there's a link between poverty and violence, and the violence, of course, takes a toll, creating generational trauma. Jim Williams takes us to West Garfield Park, where community leaders are working every day to heal deep wounds.
The news reports are so frequent.
The crime scene tape remains after a man was shot.
You might be inclined to write off the gunfire and bloodshed as just another day in a violent city, but only if you don't live here. For the people of West Garfield Park and other communities like it, the violence is searing and no less traumatic than it was on July 4th in Highland Park.
The shooting in Highland Park is tragic. I don't wish that on anyone. But young folks experience this every day in West Garfield Park, every day.
The Reverend Walter Jones is right in the middle of it, wearing many hats.
We're Fathers Who Care, we're the West Side Community Stakeholders, we're the West Garfield Park Youth Council.
Insisting attention must be paid here, too. Listen to the young, he says.
And we were talking specifically about when you hear gunfire in a community, what do you do? Yeah. Well, they say some of us jump down, hide behind cars or something, and some of us just look and see where it's coming from because we become immune to it. We hear it all the time. Now that's heavy for a young person to have to say that.
Mental health experts remind us that the traumatized, the victims of violence, are more likely to become victimizers.
Those who have been, basically violated end up violating. And we're talking about folks who are in fact in pain. So you cannot blame a child for the life circumstance that they're born into. You just simply can't do that.
Donald Dew is the CEO of Habilitative Systems, which includes the Westside Community Triage and Wellness Center. Here, as we showed you 3 years ago,
we wanted to make sure that this was a very inviting environment.
They treat victims of trauma.
Our intention was to basically deflect folk from unnecessary emergency room placement, to deflect folk from incarceration, and to deflect folk from unnecessary institutionalization.
The Reverend Walter Jones adds to the holistic approach, providing counseling for young people, teaching them goal setting, and showing them life outside the neighborhood.
The more that we keep investing in them, the more that we keep loving on them and their parents, and the more that we bring them out of this neighborhood and show them that there's something bigger, then we have a chance.
Well, Walter Jones tells us at least 90% of the young people he works with have suffered from trauma. They've either been victims of violence or witnessed the violence.
Well, as a result of the Highland Park mass shooting, the gun debate is now front and center in our nation's capital today.
Absolutely. And CBS 2's Tim McNicholas joins us live from Washington, D.C. Tim, some senators tried to connect Highland Park to Chicago's violence.
Eric and Joe, today was already the 10th hearing on gun violence hosted by the Senate Judiciary Committee just in the past year and a half. Now, that includes one hearing back in December specifically about Chicago gun violence, and today's hearing veered onto that topic as well.
Are you familiar with the fact that last year alone there were 836 homicides in Chicago?
This morning, at a hearing focused on federal change in the wake of the Highland Park shooting, the city of Chicago found itself at the center of debate.
As we work on this issue, and you look at cities like Chicago and Philadelphia with very strict gun laws, and then you say, how do we get to the crux of this issue and make certain that people are safe?
That prompted Senator Dick Durbin to clarify.
Let me also note for the record that Chicago is not Highland Park. Highland Park is in a separate county, for those who are not familiar, and is not the same jurisdiction as the city of Chicago.
Highland Park Mayor Nancy Rotering sat before lawmakers today pleading for a federal ban on assault-like weapons, saying local laws are not enough.
I appreciate and share deep concern about the gun violence issues in the city of Chicago and all of our nation's large cities and frankly elsewhere. But at the end of the day, today's hearing is about how do we reduce mass shootings. We reduce mass shootings by getting rid of combat weapons.
But some Republican senators argued banning weapons won't crack down on crime.
One of the things I worry about is the focus on the firearm that we've heard so far deflects our attention from other places where I think we could make a substantial difference. Things like focusing on the criminals that committed 836 homicides last year in Chicago alone.
To say that it's just a Chicago phenomena, it's not. It's an American phenomena.
And I asked Mayor Rotering about the statements from multiple senators who said that despite strict gun laws in Illinois, shootings still happen. She said, quote, "We are not an island and we're only as safe as the weakest gun laws in our surrounding states." Live on Capitol Hill, Tim McNicholas, CBS 2 News.
Tim, thank you very much.
Now, to understand mass shootings, we must first acknowledge that not all are covered equally.
We spoke with Gregory Jackson, Executive Director of Community Justice Action Fund. It's a national gun violence prevention organization that works directly with victims. He says it's critical to hear and share the voices of all gun violence survivors.
Unfortunately, in America, lives are seen differently. Death is seen differently. Trauma is seen differently based on, frankly, the color of your skin. You know, when I was shot, when I entered the hospital back in 2013, I wasn't met with nurses and TV cameras or therapists. I was met with investigators that questioned me as a criminal first and a client or a person seeking care second. And I think that's unfortunately what's happening all over the country. Black men and women are being perceived as threats, perceived as criminals, as opposed to being perceived as people. And the response to gun violence, even for survivors, is specifically focused on crime in our communities when we know it needs to be focused on health and well-being. I think that humanizing of those lives lost is critical to understanding the problem. And we can't pretend to know those solutions to gun violence if we don't understand the problem. And every time media fails to humanize and tell the full story of why violence happens, of why a life is lost, it's damaging and it oversimplifies what's happening in our communities. These are interpersonal conflicts and they're more connected to trauma. And we need to figure out how to treat and help people heal from this trauma as opposed to just taking a crime-only approach. This is a public health crisis and it deserves a public health response. And a public health response is people-centered. So we really need our leaders, elected officials, and any decision maker to think about the people and start to invest in those who have been most impacted by violence. And that's something we have done too little of historically. The same communities that are suffering from gun violence are also suffering from so many other conditions of neglect, of lack of resources, of lack of opportunity, of lack of access to safe spaces. And if we just start to invest in the people, commit resources to violence intervention and prevention strategies, then we'll see a dramatic turn. And communities all over the country and cities all over the country that are investing and pouring into the individuals most impacted are starting to see results. And so I hope that the Chicago leadership will step up and do the same.
Interesting perspective from Gregory Jackson. We thank him for that. Now, you hear from experts who say addressing mental health is a key factor when it comes to solving violence issues. Up next, we're going to take a closer look at some of the challenges.
And we'll meet the outreach workers who try to solve conflicts on the streets of Chicago every day. Take a look at this map. Each dot represents a mass shooting in Chicago this year. That means 4 more people shot in a single incident. Particularly striking, the geography. 9 on the west side alone and another 12 on the south side. Both areas historically hardest hit by gun violence.
Many experts believe to solve the crime issue, we need to tackle mental health first.
Our Stephen Graves joins us now with that part of the story. Stephen.
Yeah, struggles with mental health, we know, have always been an issue, but counselors tell me they haven't seen it really thrust into the forefront until recently, mainly because of new wrinkles, right? The pandemic, social media pressures. It really has forced groups to take a close look at this, tackling it specifically with young people. When you sit in this circle, sharing feelings and thoughts,
I'm always thinking about it a lot.
It's not a choice, but a requirement.
And through the group identity, that's where we see our greatest strides.
Armin Davis is a senior counselor with the organization Becoming a Man, or BAM. He leads groups of young men grades 6 to 12, getting them to look at each other and express emotions. Recently, talks involve anxiety and depression over social media.
A lot of students deal with esteem issues, and so a lot of the work is really helping them to understand that you don't have to show up this way because of likes and this thing called attention that everybody else is seeking, but you can actually get it in a healthy way.
A healthy way that does not lend itself to gun violence, but isolation due to the pandemic has presented new challenges.
Some emotional controls around anger. That's why we do positive anger expression.
Philip Cusick, senior director of BAM, helps coordinate with the city to bring discussions into schools. The city as a whole is tackling mental health more by increasing funding to about $89 million this year. Most goes toward clinics and mental health professionals with the goal of helping anyone. After a shooter killed 7 in suburban Highland Park,
there's always this conversation about those people's mental health and how did they get access to guns.
Some groups like Teamwork Inglewood want the discussions about behaviors and family dynamics in suspects of everyday shootings to become normal.
That's not always the case when we're talking about gun violence that happens in communities like Inglewood.
The hope is that when that happens, more resources can pour in and vital talks continue.
They're able to make a better decision than they would have if they had not had that experience.
And as you can see, I sat in on one of those talks. They really do help. And on the city's behalf, for the first time in its history, it's putting mental health professionals at the 911 call center. They're also bringing in some wellness training, some trauma-informed training into neighborhoods. But the challenge, guys, is getting people to come out and take advantage of it.
Right, there's a stigma there, but for you to sit into that session, what was it like to see these young people open up?
Well, you know, they specifically were the counselors, but with me in talking, I can tell you just talking about feelings and get it out there, it makes you think about things you wouldn't normally, and actually being seen and heard, it really makes a difference.
How to deal with it. That's
yeah, exactly, how to deal with it.
Yeah, great story, Stephen. Thank you very much. So to stop the cycle of violence, you have to sort of get to the heart of the conflict.
CBS News Chicago streaming anchor Brad Edwards now with a street side view of that fight.
The weekend shootings. Male victim, 24 years of age.
In West Garfield Park.
Where the advocate arrived at the hospital along with the other team members.
This is an anti-war room.
We're gonna move right into the next incident. It was a total of 4 victims.
That's a mass shooting.
All right, ready, let's set it.
And you go by?
Big Wayne.
Because?
Because I'm big. I am a street outreach worker for the Institution of Nonviolence Chicago in the West Garfield Park area of Chicago.
How much death do you see?
A lot.
When you watch the news and say they're missing the point.
That most of the violence here is inherited. Someone's father was into it with somebody's father 10 years ago. Now this kid done grew up and now he know who killed his father. So now, it just be beefs that go on and be everlasting beefs, I step in the gap and mediate a lot of conflict. 7 out of 10 times, we stopping the next shooting from happening. Truthfully.
That's anecdotal, but it's Big Wayne's word.
So that took a toll on our family.
Keisha Carson recently went from victim advocate to...
Yeah, my nephew, he was murdered in East Garfield September last year. Just senseless killing. And now it's just, everything is just shooting. Our neighborhood need a makeover.
Do you see hope?
I see hope. These people want to be loved. They need to be helped. They want to be helped. They want resources. They want things to do, but it's not there for them.
One of our victim advocates by the name of Larice Nelson, you have to have courage to do this kind of work.
He was shot July 4th after responding to another shooting.
Right now, you got a lawless community. They go to jail for a gun and be out the next day. I was a part of the problem at some point.
You ever shot somebody?
Kinda, sorta.
You ever been shot?
Yeah, I've been shot.
As we walk these streets, you are proof
that you can change. All you have to do is want to. If you want to, somebody else is gonna help you. See, I'm being the change that I'm trying to be.
And he's walking it, too. Brad Edwards, CBS 2 News.
Both members of the Institute for Nonviolence Chicago say their short-term goal is to see kids playing in the street again.
Well, that'd be beautiful.
Which says a lot, right?
Oh, yes.
Well, mentoring programs are often the first line of defense in helping youth deal with trauma.
Vondell Singleton founded Champs Mentoring and offers his insight now into what he has seen and heard through decades of work.
What we do is trauma-informed mentorship. And what it looks like, we create a circle where no one is in front, no one is in behind, we all one. So from the mentor to mentee, we both sharing about problems, concerns, issues, and we're creating this organic, safe environment where we're making it cool to talk about problems and issues and nobody's feeling judged, ridiculed, or, hopeless. And we're giving each other the answers and we're healing each other. Ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? We've all heard that question. I've never heard a young person tell me they want to gangbang, sell drugs, be a thug, do carjackings. I've never heard it. And these are in the poorest communities where I ask that question. They always say, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor, I want to go to the NBA, I want to be a professional, I want to be a chef. And what we're saying is, let's work together, let's come together, let's use our resources, our networks, our opportunities, our jobs to figure this thing out and give the opportunity where it should be given to those who don't get the opportunities every day.
To learn more about the work of Champs or to become a mentor, visit champsmentoring.com.
So you've probably heard a consistent theme here tonight, and that is a lack of resources. But where we are tonight is part of a 20-year dream, almost fully realized. As you can see behind us, there's still some construction to come. But coming this September, the Healthy Lifestyle Hub will fully open its doors to the Auburn Gresham community.
The building will serve as an anchor in the community right on 79th Street, offering a health center, dental services, a minority-owned pharmacy, and other critical services. It's an example of how investing in a community one block at a time can bring a neighborhood back to life.
I got a chance to tour the facility with Carlos Nelson, director of the Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation. He got this project off the ground, and we talked about what it means for him and the residents here.
Well, think about the fact that this building's been vacant for, 25 years, right on 79th Street. The busiest bus line in the entire city of Chicago, steps away from Halsted. It means life, it means hope. It means that the seniors that have been here and watched the disinvestment that has plagued us for years, it means that we are doing something for our own community and we're bringing something to Auburn Gresham that we haven't had access to in generations.
So this is the old Bank of America here.
Yeah. So a 5,000 square foot building that is just vacant. Bank of America abandoned us in 2018. CVS Pharmacy left with no notice in 2019. The Save-A-Lot pulled the plug in February of 2020. It's taken a very, very, very long time for us to get to, this state of despair where we are now.
Does that investment and opportunity change the negative observations or perceptions people have of this neighborhood?
It's a start, but the start is having high quality access to health care, having jobs, building wealth, and giving choices like you would have in other communities where the qualities of life are good.
How important is this investment to expanding beyond this building?
The whole idea when we designed the Auburn Gresham Healthy Lifestyle Hub was that it would be a catalyst, and it would catalyze investment and other development and build wealth while bringing high quality access to health care. Private investors that are now taking note. Much of the development, though, that I'm speaking of is being done by community members, community-based organizations, people from the communities. This movement of economic development is being done by us and for us.
This is a shining example of what this neighborhood can be, in your opinion.
This is perseverance at its finest. We need to repurpose or build on these vacant blocks, vacant land, vacant buildings. We need to take these negatives and turn this into a positive, and this is a shining example of that. Man, I'm so excited about just having this vacant building all these years, bringing it back to life. Truly exciting.
Isn't that great? The ribbon cutting and grand opening for the Healthy Lifestyle Hub takes place September 29th, and we will certainly be back to share that with you.
Well, Carlos Nelson joins us now. First, Carlos, congratulations on this achievement. In addition to the healthcare, you'll have a bank here, a cafe, a new metro station, a nearby post office, office space. So how do you think that this investment, when we talk specifically about gun violence, will help to curb that issue?
That's a really good question, Erica. And so, the question of how will it curb gun violence is, for us, a question that, the answer is right there in the answer is in the pudding, if you will. Meaning that the ingredients that make up violence, typical gun violence in communities like ours, when you think of poverty, when you think of hopelessness, when you think of disinvestment, when you think of little access to high quality health and wellness, health care, when you think of mental illness, all of those things are being addressed by this long vacant, nearly 60,000 square foot building being brought back to life. In this building, you'll have access to high quality health care under the UI Health umbrella, an immediate care and primary care center that expects to see 30,000 clients in the first year. Oral health, mental health as well, to address the mental health challenges. But more importantly, or just as importantly, this building, when fully occupied, will have 150 living wage jobs right here in this building as we work really hard to build wealth, generational wealth here in this community.
We know what it means to you, Carlos, and what a dream it's been for you, and you're seeing it almost come to fruition. We have new investment and development across the street, more coming across the street that way, much more ahead. We wish you all the best. And know what you're doing here really is truly a beacon of hope for this neighborhood.
Well, thank you very much. This is the beginnings as we catalyze more development here in Auburn Gresham.
Looking forward to seeing more. Thank you, Carlos.
Well, the issue of gun violence in Chicago is one we cover extensively here at CBS 2.
So please visit our website, cbschicago.com. You'll find tabs for our community journalism reporting, past mini documentaries, and the work of our CBS 2 investigators.
And if you want to support the great things going on here in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood, here's a start for you. The 79th Street Renaissance Festival. That happens on September 10th. Yeah, it's a day the whole community unites to show off what they're proud of, and they're about to have a brand new building and a whole lot more to be proud of.
It will be a good time. We want to say thank you for joining us. I'm Erica Sargent.
And I'm Joe Donlin. We'll see you back for the CBS 2 News tonight at 10 o'clock.